We've talked about the best, now time to talk about Andrew. And this is Gayties Toys. On today's MIA 80s Ladies, we're going to be finally wrapping up ThunderCats. We've had a few videos prior regards to some villains, some allies, but now it's time to really kind of like close the loop with the rest of the ThunderCats allies that I think, probably could have and should have been involved in the original toy line, which admittedly, and something I didn't really talk about in prior videos, had a healthy enough amount of ladies in the line between, say, Chitara, a little PVC of Wily Kit, an actual action figure of Wily Kit, Humaira, Verbal Bell, you name it. I mean, it was a hearty little line, but there's a few more allies to get to, and let's just get right into them, including Mandora the Evil Chaser, Mumm-Rana, and Jagara. Again, we've discussed the history of ThunderCats in past videos, so by all means, go back and watch those. But, essentially it ran from, as a cartoon, 1985 to 1989, surprisingly enough. And of course, spawned its own toy line by LJN. In regards to this video in particular, I think the real sort of pertinent information to keep in mind is that the ThunderCats, of course, were from their home planet Thundera, which blew up for plot reasons, and they escaped. Well, some of them escaped, and some of them died too, but at the very least, our main cast of ThunderCats found their way to Third Earth and pretty much colonized that place, so they're the heroes of the story. On Third Earth, they were chased by their mortal nemesis, the evil mutants, who followed them to Third Earth and also sort of teamed up with an ancient spirit of evil named Mumm-Rana, who happened to live there. Likewise, they made friends with, some allies there. They made plenty more enemies. There was all sorts of intergalactic shenanigans that sort of came to the doorstep. But, by and large, they made a found family on Third Earth. One of those allies came very early in the series, in the 10th episode called Mandora the Evil Chaser, featuring Mandora the Evil Chaser. She was essentially kind of like a space cop who rode this electrocharger, this really souped up interplanetary motorcycle, and, sort of acted as a cop. She was someone who, on paper, I really quite enjoyed. She was very, very dismissive of Lion-O. She was very single-minded, very black and white, very, law and order type of gal. I loved her look. I loved the bike. She was a cool character. One of the first problems here that we're going to kind of get back to a little later is that the actress who played her was also the actress who played every other female character in the first two seasons of ThunderCats. Now, I got no toleration for the hateration, and Lynn Lipton is just a wonderful woman, great voice actress. No shade on her necessarily, but the fact is, she made a voice for Chitara. She made one for Wily Kit. Frankly, I didn't even know they were they were the same actress. But she made the odd choice to make every other female character from there the same voice as Chitara, in the sense that they had that kind of like slow, haughty, low, staccato voice, and they all carried that going forward. And this is especially, egregious in, say, Willa from the Warrior Women, or again, Mandora the Evil Chaser. So, loved Mandora. That voice took me out every time. In the same vein, there's another character who's a bit of an odd duck. So, probably midway through the series, after the Lunatics had sort of jumped up on the screen, a character named Mumm-Rana appeared. And if you wonder if that name sounds familiar, it's because it is. She is essentially the, kind of the mirror image of Mumm-Rana. She is the, she calls upon the ancient spirits of good from her white pyramid. And she would take her sort of more mummified form and create a, much larger, beefier warrior type. So really, like, the different sides of the same coin for her and Mumm-Rana. So, I didn't love the character. She appeared multiple of times. However, I remember specifically missing that episode when I was a kid, and then my friends told me about it the next day, and I'm like, that is the stupidest idea I've ever heard, and my opinion has not changed much. The third ally of the ThunderCats is a proper ThunderCat, that being Jagara, often incorrectly known as Jagara. She's a character who appeared very, very late in the series, when, they did sort of a very kind of epic, if not meandering, 5-part episode called Return to Thundera, where, most of the ThunderCats took off when they realized that the Thundera had reformed, and they went to investigate and see why their homeland had sort of, just mysteriously reappeared. At the center of it, they did discover that there was sort of this big mystical gyroscope, essentially, being controlled by a powerful sorceress named Jagara. who kind of kept it together. And through, plot contrivances, the sort of omens doing whatever the plot needed it to, they did sort of safeguard the thing and keep the planet alive. And again, sort of try to, recolonize their own home this time. So the remainder of the series from here, would sort of focus on their two kind of homes, their original plus their found home. She would only appear one more time beyond that first, 5-part kind of mini movie. But a great design and a great, sort of just fun character, a lot of mystery, a lot of, things that we hadn't really seen much about her since, frankly. As I mentioned up top, LJN made just an absolutely legendary toy line during the course of the cartoon. This toy line was, smack in the middle of the 80s. So we're talking that sort of, kind of dark times I usually discuss between, say, the big three, He-Man, Transformers, G.I. Joe, and the dawn of Ninja Turtles. Right in that middle part, it was highly competitive. There was a lot of, pasta being thrown at the walls. But I mean, like Thundercats, I would say Ghostbusters, Gem and the Holograms, these are three that really kind of really succeeded amidst absolute chaos. Again, they did sort of put out a number of, female characters. Everyone forgets about poor Burble Bell. Love the Burbles. But really, they didn't really get a chance to fully explore the world of Third Earth. They started to. They had a few allies, a few villains. They really started to break it out. But, from what we could tell, before the line canceled, we saw glimpses of what could have and should have been. There was a lot of kind of strange vehicles. One of the Lunatics was finally introduced, implying that the rest of the Lunatics would have come eventually. All this would appear in pamphlets and posters and sort of, materials of, what's to come, but never actually did. But beyond that, there's really no evidence that, the warrior women that we've talked about before or these allies were to make it in there. That said, LJN didn't seem, terribly scared of ladies, especially at this time. So it's entirely conceivable that had this line, had the legs and the length of, say, He-Man or Transformers, maybe, but at least one of them has done pretty well since. In 2011, the Thundercats would get, a much hyped revival and a new ThunderCats series. It was very, kind of almost Lord of the Rings-ish. It was very epic. It was very sort of long form, kind of a bit of a slow start, a lot of world building, but it had this sort of Avatar-esque kind of, plan to it. I mean, if you ever want to go back and read what was planned for the series, I mean, the creators have certainly, showcased what, the series would have looked like. It's really unfortunate that fans really kind of didn't glom onto this at that time. Unfortunately, there's no mention of any of these characters in that series Bible, nor did they appear in the first season. However, at least Mumm-Rana and Mandora would appear in the ThunderCats War series from 2020, and that's beloved and uncontroversial in any way. But y'all here for toys. So in regards to these three, only one's been made. Super 7 has been doing ThunderCats, Ultimates figures for quite some time. It's one of those few lines they're still really dedicated to do. So they're completely all in. And they, every now and then they would do sort of what's called, it's considered a mini wave, where there would be a figure plus, a vehicle that they were known for. It wouldn't be like a ThunderCat style expensive vehicle, but something, much more manageable and really the cost of a full wave, really. So in this case, in 2023, the Electrocharger with Mandora the Evil Chaser was released, and she's great. Again, there's no voice to accompany it, so that's fine. But I mean, the figure's great, and it was such a welcome addition to include her bike, because they really are, a package deal and really quite striking on the shelves. Jagara and Mumm-Rana have yet to have action figures, and I am living, luckily, in hindsight of Comic-Con 2025. So nothing was announced there. It does seem that they are still, full steam ahead. Super 7 certainly looks like, they're not scared of obscure characters. They're doing, Thunderian guards. They're doing just wackadoo characters who had sort of one-off episodes. So I feel like, for me anyway, I feel Jagara would be a great addition to this line. Just a visually cool character. But again, if you've got a couple Mumm-Ra's, why not throw in a Mumm-Rana or two? And that'll about do it for the ThunderCats allies, as well as ThunderCats as a whole. I mean, there's the odd one-off character I could do a video for, but I mean, if we're talking, plastic immortalization, I think these three are sort of worthy, at least now in the modern collecting sphere. Perhaps not in LJN, although I would argue Mandora with a bitchin' motorcycle would have been a fantastic toy, but I digress. In any case, ThunderCats is a franchise that I love, not unlike Mandora. So I love it on paper. It's very sexy. It's very dark. It's very forbidden, but it's a tough show to watch. It's one of those few that I could watch any cartoon. I could watch He-Man till the cows come home and understand what it is and what it's there for. But ThunderCats, I don't know. Like I don't want to go back. Researching this was a little painful, to be honest. So I want to thank you for watching, for commenting, for liking, for subscribing, all those YouTubey things. And I will see you next time on MIA 80s Ladies.